Don't break your promise. Don't think you can escape from here. The filthy old man grabbed my sister's arm, trying to drag her out of the car. I was desperately pulling on her hand, resisting. We needed to close the car door quickly. We had to escape from this village as soon as possible. Soon, I could hear the voices of my mother and father too. Kelly, wait! Do you realize what you're doing to us? The sight of the three adults, upside down on the street at night, was nothing short of extraordinary. In a village with no streetlights, somewhere in a rural area, I was on the run with my sister from these adults. Why had this turned into such a hair-raising horror scenario? I was supposed to have come home to celebrate my sister's wedding after hearing about it from our mother. My name is Sally. I had left my rural family home over 8 years ago to live on my own and was now 27 years old. I'm currently working in sales at a pharmaceutical company in New York, single but still wanting to focus on my career. Selling our company's newly developed drugs to various medical schools and hospitals is hard work, but it's incredibly fulfilling. Collaborating with doctors and saving many patients' lives brings me immense joy. After graduating high school, I moved out to attend a university in New York. I paid for all my living expenses and tuition myself. While attending university, I juggled multiple part-time jobs. Even before that, since my high school days, I had been working hard at part-time jobs, desperately saving money. I was determined not to rely on my parents. The main reason I wanted to leave home was my father. My father always drunk and gambling. He was far from a father I could respect. Whenever in the same room, he would get into drunken tirades, and my mother always obeyed him. Our family farm was struggling financially, so I decided to carve out my own life as quickly as possible. My only concern was my only sister, Kelly. She was gentle and got along better with our parents than I did. Now 32, she hadn't married or found a job, instead helping out with the family farm. My drunk father would always put her down, saying, "Kelly's so clumsy. If she ever went to the city, she'd just get deceived by some bad guy and end up in trouble." In my opinion, Kelly was a laid-back, beautiful woman with fair skin and great at household tasks. Too good to be left in such a house. She was always kind and supportive of me. I loved my sister dearly. Knowing the state of our home, I had invited Kelly to leave with me. "You can find a job once we're in the city. I'll work hard at my part-time jobs. We can make it if we're together." But my sister, Kelly, with a troubled smile, shook her head. "I'm the eldest, so I've decided to stay here and look after Mom and Dad. I need to help with the farming." "That doesn't matter. We're both adults, and there are tons of siblings living independently together. If you're saying you have to live with Dad because you're the eldest, then I'll give up moving to New York." "No, you shouldn't." Kelly sharply countered my emotional opposition. "You should go. You've saved up money, right? And it's not just out of obligation. I really worry about this house and Mom, and I want to stay here." Her large, dark eyes stared intently at me. There was an undeniable force in her gaze. Overwhelmed, I decided to move to New York alone, leaving a part of my heart behind. After that, my university life progressed smoothly. Juggling academics and multiple part-time jobs was tough, but being young and energetic and having a strong resolve not to rely on my parents, I managed to get through it. My determination to face adversity was recognized, and I secured a job offer from a major pharmaceutical company. The training and work after joining were even tougher than my student days, but learning business knowledge was fun, and the dream of helping save lives and health gave me the motivation to keep going. And above all, it was Kelly who was my emotional support. Even after leaving home, I kept in touch with her through emails and phone calls. Sometimes she would express concern, saying, "Don't push yourself too hard and get sick," or praise me, "Sally, you seem so lively and enthusiastic about your work." Every time, a warm feeling would spread in my heart, inspiring me to work even harder for my sister's sake. However, whenever I asked her, "How are things with you?" her replies seemed hesitant. "Well, Mom and Dad are the same as always," or "Our earnings have dropped, but we're managing somehow." Whenever I tried to inquire more out of concern, she would evade, saying, "It's the same as when you were here." Since I never heard of any major accidents involving my sister or parents, I just told Kelly, "Let me know if anything comes up." Then, before I knew it, I turned 27. That day, I returned home late at night after a business dinner. Dealing with demanding doctors for hours was exhausting, but I could manage it for the sake of performance. Telling myself this, I checked my mailbox in the apartment building. And I found something unusual. It was a personal letter, and when I looked at the sender, it was from my mother. After leaving home, I had been in touch with Kelly, but apart from that, I had not communicated at all with my parents, neither my father nor my mother. They hadn't contacted me either, and I had never called or written a letter to them. This sudden letter from my mother was unexpected. What could this be? I thought, mixed with surprise and anxiety. Tired, I entered my apartment and read the letter. It said that my sister, Kelly, was getting married. What? I haven't heard anything. Kelly and I were frequently in touch. Yet, she never once mentioned having a boyfriend, let alone talking about getting married. Why am I learning about this from a letter sent by my mother and not from her directly? A feeling of confusion spread in my heart. The rest of the letter stated that there would be a meeting between the two families for the wedding, and I was asked to come home for it. After finishing the letter, I sighed deeply. Going home meant returning to the house where my father was. The area where our family home is located is truly rural, with houses spaced far apart, surrounded by fields, farms, and patches of woodland. It's classified as a village, not even a town. Going home felt like being trapped in a claustrophobic place with almost no chance to relax. Frankly, I was reluctant. But if my sister was really getting married, there couldn't be happier news. I had thought she would spend her life just taking care of our parents. If she had met someone special, fallen in love, and decided to marry, I couldn't be happier. I wanted to meet her partner and, of course, see my sister too. And I wanted to celebrate their marriage. The next day, I wrote a letter back to my mother, confirming my attendance at the meeting and took a day off work for the specified date. Weeks passed, and the day arrived. I traveled for 2 hours by train to reach the county where my family home was, then switched to a rental car. The meeting was scheduled to include dinner, so the sky gradually darkened towards evening. Far from the hustle and bustle of the city, without the glittering signs and crowded streets, the sky turned a deep red as evening approached. A landscape that had been so familiar during my childhood now seemed strangely extraordinary after 8 years away. I reached my family home without getting lost. The house, an old wooden structure, was visibly weathered on the walls and roof from a distance. Weeds overran the surroundings, clearly lacking maintenance. Though I believed Kelly did her best with the house, it was evident that she couldn't manage everything. Remembering my childhood years confined in this house, I felt uneasy. There was no visitor parking, so I parked the rental car nearby and walked a short distance to the house. By then, the sky had turned much darker. The deep navy overhead and the remnants of sunset's purple created a gradient in the sky, and the clear air revealed several stars. The cawing of crows sounded eerily in the silence. It's a rural area where people don't usually lock their house doors. I figured I could just walk in. Approaching the house's grimy door with a mix of nostalgia and aversion. That's when I heard it. A soft rustling in the grass. Surprised, I turned around to find my sister, Kelly, standing there. Her face was so tense, she didn't look like someone about to greet her fiancé's family. After years, my reunion with my sister, Kelly, confirmed she was still beautiful. The sight of my beloved sister was comforting. However, the joy of this reunion was not to be. Kelly! Shoo! Kelly gestured, raising her eyebrows and placing a finger to her lips as I tried to speak. Confused, I stared at her, and she whispered urgently. Why did you come back? What? That seemed obvious. To celebrate her wedding. Yet, instead of being happy about my return, she seemed almost angry. I came because of the marriage meeting. We need to go, now. She interrupted, grabbing my arm firmly. She pulled me along, forcing me to run in the direction she was leading. The situation was utterly bewildering. Yet, I sensed that the circumstances were more complex than a mere wedding celebration. She was leading me towards one of the few bus stops in the village. She dragged me behind a small shelter that doubled as a waiting room near the bus stop. What's going on? Isn't there a family meeting for your wedding today? I asked quietly. Breathless, Kelly looked down, silent. Then, suddenly, footsteps approached nearby. It was rare for people to be out at night in the village. It was clear there was only one person. Kelly shielded me against the wall, peering cautiously around the corner. Mom! Her face turned pale. Peering through the gap, I could see our mother in the distance. Over the years apart, she seemed to have aged a bit. But more shocking was her expression, twisted as if in fury. Although there was some distance, it was clear she was calling for Kelly. Kelly quickly turned to me, her tone firm. "Leave here immediately. Go back to New York." "Why? What's happening?" As if there was no time to explain, she shook her head quickly. "Make sure Mom and Dad, or anyone we know, doesn't see you. Escape as fast as you can." Pressured by her intensity, I nodded. "Okay, but what about you?" "I'll meet with Mom. Then go back home." "Wait, that means..." What would happen if my sister met our mother? What would happen if she returned home? I knew nothing. But my instincts told me I couldn't let her go back to that house. "Kelly, this way." This time, I took the lead, pulling Kelly's hand. "This is all wrong. Mom's acting strange, and this whole situation is bizarre. Plus, you're supposed to be getting married, but you don't seem happy at all." "Sally," Kelly said, entrusting her hand to me while looking sad. "I can't let you go back like this. We still have time. Let's run away. Together, let's go to New York." "But..." "Hurry." With each moment of Kelly's hesitation, our mother neared. I urged, as our mother was drawing closer. Whether out of guilt for leaving our family home or relief from this odd situation. Kelly looked at me with tearful eyes and then nodded slightly. "Let's go." We ran as fast as we could, hand in hand. Our destination was the rental car I had arrived in. The village was steeped in night, and the roads, with barely any streetlights, were hard to see. Despite almost stumbling over pebbles, we kept running. Kelly didn't let go of my hand. Soon, we reached the car. As I was inserting the key, Kelly suddenly let out a high-pitched scream. I spun around. In the distance, mountains loomed, and the dark landscape was only fields. There, faintly, I saw a shadow. Could it be an animal, a monkey perhaps? Or something else, something we shouldn't see? Wrinkled skin, hair unkempt and wild. Underneath, something like an eye glints. We shouldn't get any closer. Goosebumps rose on my skin. Before I could even think who it might be, I felt a visceral sense of disgust. "Get in the car, quick!" Kelly screamed. A note of desperation in her voice, more intense than when she had seen our mother. With trembling hands, I managed to open the car door. All the while, the figure in the darkness edged closer. Quickly, I opened the passenger door for my sister, Kelly, to get in. The person looming behind her was an old man. His wrinkled face and unkempt hair looked filthy, yet the glittering gold accessories on his neck and wrists reflected in the car's lights. Who was this old man? Did such a person exist in this village? There was no time to think. The old man eerily extended his black arm from behind and grabbed Kelly's arm as she slid into the passenger seat. "Ah!" Kelly screamed. The old man tried to drag her out of the car. "Where do you think you're running to?" He growled in a beast-like, hoarse voice. Kelly was about to slide out of the car seat. Immediately, I leaped out of the driver's side to the other door. "Let go! Let her go!" I grasped the old man's hand, gripping it over Kelly's. Clawing at his palm and fingers to pry them off her arm. Sales jobs require physical strength. I also had considerable strength from carrying heavy documents regularly. While doing so, I kicked out at the old man's legs. Unyielding, he twisted halfway, trying to pull Kelly towards him. "Running away, you disgraceful daughter! Don't think you can escape from here!" The old man shouted amid our struggle. After a brief battle, combining my strength and Kelly's resistance, we managed to wrench her from the old man's grasp. Just before he could change position to grab her again, I managed to close the passenger door in the nick of time. Before he could circle around, I dashed back to the driver's seat and quickly started the car. "Don't break your promise, you wretched woman!" I heard the old man shouting from behind. Then, as if out of nowhere, the voices of our mother and father also reached us. "Kelly, wait! Do you realize what you're doing to us?" The sight of the three adults, upside down on the street at night, was nothing short of extraordinary. It was clear that the old man and our parents were in cahoots. Kelly, looking down, whispered in a barely audible voice, "Just go." I had intended to do just that, so I nodded and pressed the accelerator firmly. As we started moving, we both let out a huge sigh of relief and exhaustion. The unfolding events were like something out of a suspense drama. I had somewhat given up on a perfectly harmonious dinner due to our father, but I never imagined things would turn this wildly wrong. After driving for a while, we reached an area with some commercial facilities. It was much quieter than the city, but the lights from convenience stores and commercial buildings on both sides brought immense relief. My marriage was forced upon me. Kelly finally spoke, after quietly crying in the passenger seat. So, it wasn't her own choice. Otherwise, she wouldn't have looked so desperate before her wedding. What exactly happened? I urged her to tell her story. Remember the person who tried to grab me in front of the car? He's the creditor of our family's debt. Debt? I gasped, turning to look at her in shock. I remembered the importance of safe driving. Even though I was there, it's really sad and embarrassing. Dad, you know he was bad with alcohol and gambling even when you were still at home, Sally? Yes, that's why I left. I wanted to take you with me, sis. Kelly smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for that time." After that, no matter how hard I tried, Dad couldn't stop. Every time he drank, he would rant about unpleasant things, hit Mom, and I would desperately try to stop him. It was a constant cycle. I tried to get him interested in other hobbies, like movies or cooking, but nothing worked. It only got worse. But our family farm wasn't making much money. Eventually, we couldn't make ends meet. That's when he started borrowing money. That's terrible. He drank and raged, and gambled, instantly dissolving our precious living expenses. How did she feel about such a father's behavior over the past 8 years? The pain and guilt were almost too much to bear. He bought loads of alcohol with the borrowed money, shouting he'd win everything back at the slot the next day. But he never could, and the debt just kept growing. I don't know if I should ask, but how much is it now? About $50,000. $50,000! I exclaimed so loudly the car windows nearly shattered. I couldn't fathom how much had to be squandered to accumulate such an amount. The enormity of the debt made my hands wobble on the steering wheel. Unable to bear it anymore, with no way to repay, Mom and I went to see the creditor directly. The same person who tried to grab me earlier. His name is John. We begged him, saying, "Please, even if it's just the interest, can you forgive it? We will responsibly repay the principal my father borrowed." Then he said. Kelly paused, trembling slightly. "If you don't want to, don't force yourself." "No, it's okay." He said, "If you marry my grandson, I'll cut the interest in half." That's how my marriage was decided. That can't be true. Dad happily agreed to it. He was increasing the money he could use, even though it didn't involve sending his own daughter, me, to an unwanted marriage. To think I was just a possession to him, it really hurt. Then, Kelly shared that my mother went along with my father's decision without opposition. Furthermore, I really don't want to say this, but John said, "Your sister's in New York, right? If you give her up too, I'll make the interest zero." After finishing her story, Kelly sobbed with big tears rolling down her cheeks. I felt a chill run down my spine. John must have planned to lure both of us into his house and intentionally increased the debt for negotiation. The idea of trading daughters for money was like a horrifying custom from decades ago, happening in my own family. Overwhelmed by fear, I had to stop the car at the roadside. I then embraced Kelly's shoulders with my now free hands. "Kelly, you've been through so much." "Yes, I'm sorry, for getting you involved, for not being able to stop Dad." In a town still retaining a rural ambience, my sister and I cried together in an embrace. How lonely, desperate, and painful her days must have been. Why couldn't I have helped her sooner? The story was too terrible, I considered it at home. But he threatened, "If you run away, I'll find and bring back your sister." That's why I couldn't tell you anything when we talked on the phone recently. I'm sorry. Sis, you've been carrying this alone. It must have been hard. It's okay now. I'm here. Let's get through this together. After crying together, we resumed driving. We managed to catch the last train as we had left the village early, taking Kelly back to the familiar scenery of New York. Walking side by side, the lingering goosebumps reminded me that the events in the village were not a dream. Exhausted by the time we reached my apartment, We had a late dinner and slept together in a warm bed. The next day, Kelly pulled out a loan agreement from her pocket. I've been carrying this with me all the time. Smart move from my sister. With this, we can do something. Especially here in New York. I took another day off work and quickly looked up a trustworthy law firm. Kelly and I visited them that day with the loan agreement. The lawyer listened, making a troubled face, then shared several things with us. After that, we stopped by the government office to consult about severing ties with our parents. After living in my apartment for about a week with Kelly, we decided to go back to our family home again. We needed to declare our decision to cut ties with our parents. As soon as Dad saw us, he was furious, and Mom, sitting next to him, was shaking with a pale face. Already drunk, his face beet red, Dad swung a bottle of liquor towards Kelly as soon as he heard our intention to disown them. "Don't you dare joke with me," he screamed. I jumped in just in time to stop him. Then he turned to me, "You too, Sally. If you had just stayed home quietly, everything would have gone smoothly," he yelled, trying to hit me with the bottle. "Stop it!" I shouted, protecting Kelly while desperately avoiding Dad's violence. The struggle continued between our rampaging father and us trying to stop him. However, in a moment of carelessness, the bottle Dad swung hit my shoulder hard. "Ouch!" I screamed, falling to the floor with a thud. But right after that, I looked up at Dad with a stern expression. "Dad, all of this is being recorded." As he uttered a foolish "huh?" I turned to the entrance of the living room. From there, a man in a suit holding a camera appeared quietly. He was the lawyer we had consulted about the debt, Mr. Smith. "This is evidence of domestic violence," Mr. Smith stated calmly. I had deliberately created an opportunity for Dad to hit me, recording solid evidence of his violence. Dad shouted, "You're underhanded. Bringing a lawyer, huh?" That's how those smart Alecs from New York are. While Mom and the lawyer tried to calm Dad down and make him sit, he kept resisting and shouting. But then the lawyer stated matter-of-factly, "Given the clear violence, we'll need to call the police." He smoothly contacted the police. "Police? That's an exaggeration." Dad showed his agitation, still holding the bottle he used to hit me. Mom turned even paler. Indeed, in this situation, there is a possibility that Dad might become enraged at every turn, preventing any reasonable discussion. Moreover, even if the police are called, my sister and I have already decided to cut ties with our parents. Kelly and I had nothing to lose. Surprisingly, the police arrived promptly, not what you'd expect in a depopulated village. They were robust men, capable of easily restraining my father, who was now a drunk man past his 60s. Seeing them, Dad shrank back, clicking his tongue. "What, you gonna arrest me?" "That hasn't been decided yet." "Including that, we'll need to discuss everything now," one of the officers said firmly. Dad, who had been so aggressive just moments ago, became meek and quietly sat down on the floor. Mr. Smith opened the loan document and explained that Kelly and I were not co-signers, so we had no obligation to repay our parents' debts. "Furthermore, your parents have been taking all of Kelly's earnings to pay off the debt. And for your father's personal benefit, he attempted to force Kelly into a marriage against her will, even trying to submit a marriage registration without her consent. Kelly, you can sue your parents for this." "Sue? Who'd listen to some outsider's story?" The policeman glares at my father, who tries to lash out again. Then he was silent again. Additionally, the domestic violence we just recorded, and there are multiple bruises on Kelly's body in unnatural places. Mr. Smith spoke calmly, but the story was unbearable for me. "From what we've heard from her, it's highly likely these are bruises from violence inflicted by you, sir. We can file for damages, or even treat it as a criminal case." I nodded, feeling like crying. The pain from the single blow I had just taken on purpose was significant. Kelly had endured that pain multiple times. From our out-of-control drunk father. How painful and hard it must have been. I will never forgive my father for everything he's done, nor my mother for not stopping him even once. "What do you mean bruises, huh? Got any proof?" Dad shouted. Mom, with tears in her eyes, lowered her head almost touched the floor, pleading, "Please, just let it go. Our family is already ruined because of the debt. It was hard for me to give my daughter to that man, but we had no choice. And now you want to cut ties and ask for compensation? That's impossible. Please stop." It's too late now, Mom. You didn't even try to protect Kelly until it got this far. It's too late for you to show up after running away from home. Right, Sally works in New York, right? Earning a lot, aren't you? If you just pay off Dad's debts, everything will be settled, won't it? My tearful mother looked up at me, almost begging. Rage exploded inside my head. Not just Dad, but Mom too, they both only see their own daughters as money or possessions. Enough! Who's going to pay for that? What do you think your children are? Kelly and I are people, not cash machines or things you can just use as you please. I yelled at my parents. I really wanted to hit them, but I held back, knowing it would change the story if I resorted to violence. Kelly and I want to live our lives freely. We're cutting ties with this house. Kelly will live in New York from now on. We will never contact you. I said firmly, grabbed Kelly's hand, and quickly left the house. The lawyer followed us. The police officer said, "We've heard everything. We'll pass this on to the appropriate department in the city," and then left. We decided to deal with compensation and legal matters through the lawyer. Afterward, I lived with Kelly in my apartment, taking care of various procedures. Months later, the court issued a restraining order against our parents for Kelly and me. They were also ordered to repay the money they took from Kelly. The creditor John, who had forced Kelly into marrying his grandson, had to pay compensation. The loan was transferred to John's son. Since it was true that Dad had borrowed a large amount of money, our parents had to work in his son's factory to repay the debt. The factory being in a rural area, the salary wouldn't be much. It could take them ages to repay. Moreover, Dad was diagnosed with alcoholism after consultations with lawyers and specialists. The cost of treatment and counseling added to their burden. Even though he had a debt to repay, the money was also deducted, and he no longer had the financial wherewithal to drink alcohol, although he was not very happy about it. In fact, it is doubtful that they can even maintain an honest life. While my parents were preoccupied with their self-inflicted circumstances, we were able to safely disassociate ourselves from them, and we lived together amicably and peacefully. Through acquaintances and friends, I introduced Kelly to a job. She, being diligent and polite, quickly became liked and secured employment. Time passed, and then one day. "Kelly, is that true?" She had some surprising news to share. She had started dating a colleague from her company. I was overjoyed for her and cooked a feast that night. "Sally, you're getting too excited. It's kind of embarrassing." "I can't help it. To think that you, who was trapped in that house for so long, has finally freed herself and found a boyfriend on her own. It's just too wonderful," I said, tears of joy in my eyes, holding her hand. "Sally, thank you so much. Because of you, I can live my own life now. No, it's not just me. Kelly, you worked hard too." Around that time, I also found a partner in the same profession, and we planned a double date soon. The Kelly I see now is nothing like the one engulfed in sadness and despair on that nightmarish night. She's vibrant, healthy, radiating a happy aura as both a person and a woman. We'll continue to do the work we love, using the money we earn for our own lives. Dating the people we choose, and perhaps getting married someday. I'm sure we will remain close as we make the most of our own lives with each other.